We're taking a few weeks out of the year to get involved in a study of basic metaphysical interpretation of the Bible. It is our hope that you'll find something that you can take hold of. If you're not interested in Bible study, then perhaps just the essence of the ideas that come forth might be helpful. We hope they will be. Teaching is a very interesting experience. We tend to be very concerned, mostly concerned with what we teach. The fact is, especially with truth, you don't teach truth. You teach yourself. So that in a sense, this interpretation of the Bible is not the interpretation of the Bible. It is an interpretation of the Bible. The interpretation that is valid for you is that which comes out of your consciousness. We can only help to draw forth something from within yourself. I've always been joyfully, whimsically impressed with the story of Lord Alfred Whitehead. He was once asked what he was teaching at the university. He said, without any trace of ego, rather surprisingly, he said, "I teach Whitehead 1, Whitehead 2, and Whitehead 3. So I suppose we could say today is Butterworth 3. We're continuing with the study of the Genesis account of the first 7 days of creation, which we're seeing as 7 steps in the creative process. We've tried to make clear, and we emphasize it again and again, that the creation story is not history. Many of us are aware of that, and yet it's so easy to forget it when we talk about in the beginning God created, and so we think of God up there doing certain things, push things together to create the heaven and the earth. The long-standing controversy over the literal acceptance of the Bible, as it is now contemporarily translated, is heating up again in the past few years. The fundamentalist creationists, insisting that the world was created in 7 days 6,000 years ago, putting the intelligent reader into the position of having to accept, without question, the Bible's incredibilities, impossibilities, yes, and even obscenities. I think it's important to note that the practice of accepting the Bible as the infallible Word of God did not begin until long after the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century A.D. It was an attempt to stamp out Gnosticism, free thinking, to give total authority to the church. And it is interesting that one of the important figures of the church in the early years, Father Origen, in the 3rd century A.D., said, "If one takes the history of the creation in a literal sense, it is absurd and contradictory." As many of us know, the actual consideration of the Bible as the infallible Word of God did not begin until the Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther. And the Protestant Reformation was a protest against the infallibility of the Pope, which separated the church. So the fundamentalists simply substituted the infallibility of the Bible for the infallibility of the Pope. And thus, from that time on, the Bible was God's holy word, inviolable, untouchable, except exactly as it is written, which puts us in a rather peculiar position. So we see the creation story not as an event that happened back there sometime. It has nothing to do with beginnings in terms of time, but as an articulation of a process that is just as much a part of our lives today as it may have been in the antediluvian age. So we're considering the sequential steps as an evolving meditation technique, which makes it applicable to us, something we can use in putting the creative process to work in our lives every day. Theologians have always considered religion as a horizontal study, historical study, of events and places and persons, often saints and prophets, who lived sometime back there, as they say, when God walked the earth. So to get back to God, as the evangelists often preach it, means to get back to the study and acceptance of Bible times. But the metaphysical approach to religion deals with what I like to call the vertical perception of God. Not horizontal, not in terms of time, but vertical, in terms of the within and the without. To get back to God is to get back to the ground of being, back to the fundamental principle, the basic realization of the allness of God, and of man as Emerson says, is an inlet that may become an outlet for all there is in God. You and I are thinking creatures. But we think by reason of the fact that we live in infinite mind. This is our milieu. You are a point of consciousness within infinite mind. You live in the same mind as the greatest seers and prophets of all time. Paul alludes to this when he says, let that same mind be in you that was also in Christ Jesus. So we need to realize that revelation is progressive, not a special dispensation of God to someone at some time back there, which is the horizontal perception. But revelation is a quality of divine mind and a faculty of the mind of each one of us, which is a vertical perception. So what God is revealing to you today may well be more important to you than what he may have said to the prophets or the sages of other times. That would be shocking to many theologians, but it's important, I think, to consider. As I say often, the gospel according to you may be more important to you than the gospel according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's your consciousness. Because of the horizontal reception of truth, we've often let the past speak words, the words we say we believe, and yet we do not. Historical creeds and ritual bind us to the past in words that have often lost any relevance to our lives today. So in dealing with the creative process, we're talking about the working of mind in which our mind thinks. It is the vertical perception in which mind is an infinite potential for unfoldment, which always works from within, like a fountain flowing forth, and as the scientists say, ex nihilo, out of itself. Psychologists have been telling us for a long time that we're only half awake, using but a small part of our mental resources. So the need is not to put something into us, but to awaken a process that is innate, to release our imprisoned splendor, as the poet says. I love the facetious comment of George Bernard Shaw, the wit. He said, few people think more than 2 or 3 times a year. I have made an international reputation by thinking once or twice a week. You see, he's talking about creative thinking, whereas most of us mostly think reactively. We think we're thinking, but we're thinking about something that somebody told us. You're reacting right now to thoughts. It may well be that some of you have a way of isolating it in consciousness and at the same time thinking creatively. Much that comes out of this meeting will be a creative expression. You go forth from here, you tell people what you heard today, and a lot of it may be not what you heard at all, but what you felt, what you experienced inside. Many of us in our meditation practice take time to think creatively, to let the flow of inspiration come forth from within us. It's important to realize this and have confidence in this, what we call the process. Trust the process. There's a mind flow through you if you can just accept it and have confidence in it and work with it, intuitionally, inspirationally. And we're not talking about brain power. The brain is the instrument of mind. The brain doesn't secrete thought as the liver secretes bile, as we've said. The brain and the mind are as different as the switchboard and the one placing a call. The fundamental truth is you are in mind, infinite mind. So you cannot be aware of a need without being in touch with an inner resource. The Bible says, before they call, I will answer. In the heart of man, the cry. In the heart of God, supply. You can never be aware of a need. But deep within you, there's an answer to the need. It's in the same mind, always. It's the opposite, it's the shadow. It always comes after, if you can experience it. And let the revelation or the inspiration of the infinite flow through you. The Genesis account says, darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit moved upon the waters. This is not to denote emptiness, void, but to turn attention away from things to focus on the principle. The principle is there's only one presence and one power. There can be no absence, no lack, no limitation within you in God consciousness. So we want to focus on the principle and turn within to what John calls the true light that lighteth every man coming into the world. But we need to have faith in this divine mind process where there's always an answer. And the answer is closer to you than breathing and nearer than hands and feet, as Tennyson says. So the first movement of spirit on the waters, remember the waters indicate the infinite possibilities that are here in mind. First movement is, let there be light. We dealt with that a couple of weeks ago, which we talked of as primal understanding, not knowing about light, but just knowing. One of the things you can think about is a kind of an exercise. We're not talking about light that you can see out there like you see the sun, but take a moment right now, just close your eyes for a moment, and to see the big light of the sun out there, way off in the distance. Now see yourself coming closer and closer and closer, and the sun getting larger and larger, closer and closer. Yet this sun is primal light, so it's not hot, it's not fiery, so it doesn't hurt you. You go closer and closer, you keep looking into this great ball of fire that comes right up to you. You're right face to face with it, and you go right through it. Step out on the other side. Now you don't see the light, but you see from the light. You're in the light. Now you open your eyes. This is a little exercise you can try for yourself sometime. It's a marvelous meditation technique. You're not seeing anything out there, but you're in it, and you see from it. This is what we call primal illumination. In the second movement, let there be firmament, awakening the ability to see creatively. First of all, you're simply in the light. You're seeing in this primal sense, but you see creatively. We talked about it as being like going into a pantry filled with all sorts of foods and condiments. But suddenly you see it as the possibility of a cookbook with all sorts of recipes of soufflés and pies and cakes and so forth. Nothing there but the possibility of all these things. You see creatively. You begin to see through the firmament consciousness. This was the second movement of mind, seeing from within. Not a thing you see, but a power to see with. Dr. Harry Overstreet says that this one movement in mind distinguishes people from one another. People who are creatively alert are much more interesting than those who are not. They seem almost to belong to a different species, or perhaps to a higher level of evolution. They see not only what is, but what might be. And the power to see what might be is one of the chief traits that distinguishes human beings from one another. Today we're going to deal with the third step of the creative process, the third day of creation. Genesis 1, 9 through 13. Let's read. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. The third day of creation. Now the seas represent unformed states of mind. We often say a person is at sea when he's in doubt about his mental processes. The dry land is the mental image of formed thoughts. Remember, we're not dealing with manifest results, with an evolving process in mind. When we talk about the dry land appearing, it doesn't mean that suddenly the earth appeared. It has nothing to do with the earth that we stand on. It's symbolic. You find that the astronomy of the writer of Scripture was rather primitive, because he creates the dry land in the sense of an earth, and he creates a sun, which comes next week. The sun comes after the earth, which makes a rather peculiar solar system. But he simply wasn't an astronomer. His consciousness of these things was very primitive. So recall the sequence of the creative process, unfolding like the unfoldment of a rose. First of all, getting back to the principle, starting with the principle. The Hebrew is Breshith Elohim. Back to the principle. Then out of this, getting a sense of enlightenment. The light comes. We see with light. Then the further rarefication of the light is the faith process, where we see light refined into a perception to see creatively. Then it rarefies itself further to becomes the dry land. The image of the waters moving together and the dry land appears, the forming of a thought image of mind. Now, it's easy to lose our way here in the usual process of using God mind and working with metaphysical gimmickry. Get the idea of ex nihilo, coming out of itself, not putting something into the mind. We're not filling our mind with a lot of subconscious feelings and thoughts so that we can become confident and creative. We're releasing it out of ourselves, like we've said, like the unfoldment of a rose, coming forth from within ourselves, always within out. So this third step deals with imagination, which is often referred to as mental imagery. But this is not a matter of simply holding pictures in mind, because they will undoubtedly be influenced by outer experience. As Paul says, don't let the mind be shaped by the world about you, but let God remold your mind from within. One of the unfortunate things when we think of the metaphysics of this is we tend sometimes to simplify it into a sort of a human experience that whets our acquisitive instinct. So we talk about holding images. I want a new car, so I imagine a new car. I paste a picture of a car up on the desk before me or on the washstand where I can see it constantly. I want to be like this person or like that person. We look at this and we sort of mentally visualize it and treasure map it. And we're trying to get it into our consciousness. Well, those things work, but that isn't what we're talking about. And that's what I sometimes refer to as metaphysical gimmickry, because we're talking too much about trying to put something from outside in, instead of releasing it from within out. So the third step in the creative process deals with imaging, but again in a primal sense, if you can use that word again. As an eachness within the allness of God, you are, I am. So in its primal sense, this third step deals with, if we can coin a word, the I-amaging process. I-am-aging instead of imaging. Not imagining something that we can see out here, because we tend to use all sorts of outside influences that are impinging upon our mind. But I-amaging, releasing from within ourselves, this kind of imaging, which is very creative. The dry land is appearing from the waters gathering together, which is mind acting on itself, giving rise to intuition, your personal revelation, something that comes from within yourself, and suddenly you say, I see. Yes, I see. What do you see? You don't see something that's been pictured from the outside. You see something new, something creative, something that is yours, something that is you. So in our meditation practice, we need to continue to return to the principle in the beginning allness. Get this sense of starting from the ground of your being, not God out there, not trying to reach in divine mind to get something, but to release it from your own inner flow. This is creative. It's shocking how many persons are bogged down in the I can't consciousness. And those people who have no hope written all over their faces. People who are plodding along at their jobs, in their marriages, in their relationships, in conformity to all the things that society expects of them, but who have really given up all hope of change or betterment or help or healing. As we'll come to in the sixth step, several weeks away, God created man in his own image. This is your true image, the I-amage. You were created with divine potentials and the power to fulfill them. God succeeds every time a child of God is born. You are born to win, to overcome, to release inner power, to release this tremendous creative potential from within you, which is you. One of the reasons why many artists do not succeed is they become unconscious copyists. They're looking at things out there and simply reproducing them. A true artist, a real artist, a great creative artist, releases it from within out. He has the revelation. He has the feeling. I see. Then he puts it on paper. He's an inventor. He has ingenuity. He comes out of his own inner self. So important. A criminal was discovered to have a tattoo on his chest that read, "Born to lose." One might wonder what course his life would have taken if the imprint upon his consciousness, whether or not on the tattoo, was born to win. In other words, he had a loser self-image, which is probably true with many of us unconsciously. The creative process is an activity within you which will fulfill that which you can imagine and expect. That which you can imagine will actually become a part of your experience. See how this works in a kind of a literal sense and almost in an outward sense. Two psychologists at the Veterans Administration told how they had tried an experiment on mental patients using the imaging process. They worked with 45 men in the Veterans Administration Hospital. And the patients would be given some questions to answer. And they would be urged to answer as a typically well-adjusted person. Now, here were people who were mentally deficient in some way or mentally disturbed. They were told to challenge themselves to answer these questions, not as they spontaneously would, out of their sense of confusion, but to think for a moment how a well-adjusted person would answer, and try to answer in that way. So they had to imagine how the well-adjusted person would act, which was challenging to them, something they hadn't done before. 3/4 of the patients, we're told, showed improvements, and some of them quite dramatic improvements. So by acting like and even feeling like normal people, they fulfilled the thought that Troard articulates when he says, "Having seen and felt the end, you have willed the means to the realization of the end." And one of the most effective ways that we use the imaging power of mind is through worry. Very creative subject, worry. Worry is based on the belief that some undesirable condition already exists. And you worry about it. You imagine it. You vividly picture it in mind, the undesirable condition that you're worrying about. It becomes an obsession with you. People carry this vision around with them all the time, this terrible thing that's going to happen. So because you see and feel the end, you will the means to the realization of the end. So worry is one of the most effective illustrations of the creative process at work in mind. It's one of the most creative illustrations of prayer. You're praying about it because you're worrying. You've got this picture visually in your consciousness, and you have it all the time. An example, a man who had the full care of his invalid mother said, "For 8 years I have been filled with fear that I would lose my job and would be unable to continue with her expensive treatment. It has been a source of perpetual worry in my mind." Just imagine, 8 years of imaging a condition. 8 years. Constantly willing the means to the realization of the end. Of course it happened as he'd feared. As Job said, "That which I fear has come upon me." You wonder how it wouldn't have happened before 8 years. He must have been very persistent to this process and resistant to the negative application of it. The man shared the experience after he had discovered what he'd been doing, so he began to change his way, and he carefully worked to reverse the process, seeing himself in a secure and well-paying job, and a whole new world of prosperity and freedom eventually opened up to him, and he learned a great lesson through it. This is why Jesus says, "Judge not according to appearances, but judge righteous judgment." If you live in the belief that your experience is totally dependent on what happens to you, then you tend to become tentative and cautious and even a little paranoid. And every changing condition has the power to pull your strings and to determine how you're going to think or feel or act. Of course I feel terrible about this. Look what he said. He made me do it. He caused me to be upset. That's the way our consciousness works. Or if our concerns are financial, then the daily Dow Jones report becomes our personal mood meter, giving us faith or fear, joy or depression. It's a terrible way to live. Many people can't tell you how they feel until they read the paper in the morning and get the weather report. Find out all about Gloria and they say, "Oh, terrible, we're going to have a terrible time." But if we really believe that life is lived from within out, and if we persistently establish ourselves in the consciousness of oneness at the root of our being, then we see from an attitude, as Wall Street would say, that is bullish. And having seen and felt the end, we will the realization to the end. It has been said, act as if it were impossible to fail. I think Dorothea Brandy once said that. To be ambitious for prosperity and yet feel poor, to desire healing and always feel weak and afflicted, is about like trying to reach east by traveling west. No philosophy in the world can bring success to the person who is forever indulging his emotions with visions of inadequacy and limitation. No matter how diligently you work, if you feel less than you desire yourself to be, that feeling is going to neutralize your efforts. The secret of achieving prosperity and well-being and success lies in so vividly imaging it that you literally exude the consciousness of it. You breathe it. You see yourself prosperous. You act prosperous. You dress prosperous. You voice prosperous. You'll draw yourself prosperous conditions. The truth is that within you now, the possibility of success and achievement is with you. But if you imagine you may fail, and you frustrate this inner I am age, this creative potential that is ever seeking to express through you, and you will fail. Simply because you have imagined something completely limited to your being. A successful industrialist once said, "It's just as easy to see yourself successful as it is to see yourself a failure, and far more interesting." You're going to imagine something. So why not imagine that which is creative, positive, and good? Another thing we've mentioned many times before, the experimental psychologists have proven that the human nervous system cannot tell the difference between the actual experience and the experience that is imagined in detail. Think about that for a minute. The human nervous system cannot tell the difference between the actual experience and the experience imagined in detail. There's an interesting experiment conducted some years ago at the University of Chicago. A group of students were divided into 3 control groups. They were taken to a gymnasium. They took turns in throwing basketballs at a basket. Each one was carefully scored for proficiency. When they had them all scored and had a sort of a percentage average of their ability to shoot baskets, then the first group was told to come to the gym for 1 hour every day for 30 days and practice shooting their baskets. The second group was told to go home and forget all about it. The third group was told to go home and for 30 days, take an hour every day, take a quiet place and get still and close their eyes and imagine successfully throwing baskets. Just throw the baskets in their imagination. See themselves throwing them. 30 days, an hour a day. At the end of the 30-day period, they were all brought together again in their testing area. They were tested again for proficiency. And the ones who had no practice obviously showed no improvement. The ones who had practiced regularly showed 24% improvement. But the people who had simply been imagining, what I call the Imagineers, imagining that they were shooting baskets, they hadn't had a basketball in their hands, just imagining it, improved 23%. 23% to 24%, almost identical. And there it is. The nervous system didn't know the difference. One outstanding golfer a few years ago, I can't remember his name, wrote a golf book about this. And the whole book was about the imagining process of seeing shots, seeing yourself playing golf, which you can do all winter or lying in bed at night. Practice your game purely in your own mind, and saying that it could improve the golf game tremendously. You can practice sales, typing skills, all sorts of things, music, tremendously important. It's an important thing to see then that in our consciousness, when we imagine something, we're actually involved in preparing the way for it and making it come. So what are you imagining? What are you holding in your mind? In fear, in worry, or in faith, or in vision? Now remember, in our meditation process, being revealed through the 7 steps of the creation, which we think of as 7 stages or periods of a meditation technique, we're going to turn away as much as we can from exterior influences and see it as a releasement of intuition and inspiration. Keep that in mind now. When we talk about mental imagery, we're talking about an imagination that comes out of our inmost self, which is creative. It's you. You're not copying. You're not reacting. You're releasing your own imprisoned splendor, your own oneness with this divine flow. So return to the principle. Let there be light. Let there be a firmament or faith. Let the dry land appear. Let the picture form. As it forms, let the mind gently deal with the question, what would I like to be? How would I like to experience these things? What would I like to have? What would I like my life to take shape in? You'll find a mental image, mental motion picture beginning to develop. And you'll begin to see yourself in a new perspective, a new image, as confident and mature and responsible and creative. Not patterning after something from the world, but releasing your own innate self, your own I-amage, your oneness. This is the kind of person that we all really want to be. Some of us have never really had too much confidence in ourselves. Have never really had faith that we could release our own intuitive awareness. So we read magazines and we look at books and we look at people and we study things outside and say, I'd like to be like that, I'd like to be like that. Within yourself, you really would not like to be like anything except you. As someone asked Thoreau when he was a youngster what he was going to be when he grew up, he said, I'll be I. No one was more true to his vision than he. Many of us have never contemplated this process. When God created you, he created you whole. There's a wholeness within you. Even though you've been asleep to most of it, you experience only part of it. So the need is to release our imprisoned splendor, to release this wholeness. The infinite expressing itself as you, not as a carbon copy of something else, but as you, as what you really are. Release your inner beauty, release your inner power, your inner articulation, your inner creativity from within yourself. So we're going to maintain this position as we consider these steps, and at the end we're going to think in terms of using this as a meditation process, a technique by which we can all release tremendous creative potential in whatever way we want to apply it in our work, whatever it may be. And this is not pasting on a new self-image from the outside. It is the dry land appearing out of our own inner oneness. It is our I-am-age. And the beautiful thing is that your mind, no matter what you are, or who you are, or how you've limited yourself, your mind is one with the allness of infinite mind. Not just because you say it. This is the reality. This is the ground of your being. You're always at one with the infinite mind. So it is an inlet and may become an outlet for all there is in God. All there is in God. Not just make do, not just I'll get along, I'll make the best of it, but all there is, the wholeness, the fullness. All things begin in this imaging process. Anything that has ever come forth into the world has come out of the I-amaging experience of something coming from within a person, intuitively. Shakespeare describes the process that scientists, inventors, poets, composers, and painters experience when he says, and as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, The poet's pen turns them to shape and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. That's the ex nihilo process. Gives to airy nothing, ex nihilo, out of nothing, releasing that imprisoned splendor. In the same sense, your own I-imaging takes hold of what seems to be the airy nothing. Genesis calls it the gathering together of the waters, and makes something out of it. The dry land appears. I've often suggested an interesting technique that's been helpful to me. We've used it often in some of our retreats. Technique for practicing the imaging process, and I call it the projected diary. You might try this sometime. At night before retiring, take some time to write in a diary or a notebook the experiences of the day. You know how a diary is. Dear diary, I did this or I did that or I thought this and I felt that and this was my day. But do this with a little different wrinkle. Project yourself in thought 24 hours ahead. Just imagine that you're sitting on the bed tomorrow night, not tonight. Tomorrow night you're sitting on the bed. You're looking back at the day that tomorrow is. You write down the diary account of what happened tomorrow, but you're writing it down as if it happened today. Is your projected diary. Of course, this forces your mind into thinking, what do you really want to happen, you see? Unconsciously, you have to say something. And so you'll say, well, I talked to the boss today and he said, you're doing good work and I'm going to give you a raise. Or whatever it is, you're imaging something that you have as an expectation. But it challenges you to think in a creative sense, your projected diary. In other words, let the dry land emerge. Let the picture unfold from within. Now, this is not going to be a forecast of events in any way, shape, or form. But it can be, and probably will be, a predetermination of consciousness, which will set a trail for you. It sets a kind of an unconscious goal. Provides a way in which you'll begin to work in the direction of your image. Of course, this takes a lot of discipline. Of course. People often say, well, that takes a lot of concentration. I don't concentrate very well. Just think about the last time you worried and see how you concentrated. It takes a lot of creative thinking. But this doesn't mean just sitting around mouthing cheerful platitudes. Creative thinking, or as we usually call it, positive thinking, does not make creative power, nor does it change God or conditions. But it's a matter of synchronizing yourself in mind with the creative flow from within. Tell yourself often that you are a creative creature. You have a tremendous potential for a creative flow. Many of us go all through our lives and never release our creative potential. As the poet says, they die with all their music in them. Never release our own innate melody, our own oneness with this creative possibility. Tell yourself constantly, this creative flow in me is coming forth today in a new and wonderful way. Remember, it is your mind, and your mind exists as a state of consciousness within infinite mind, the same mind that was in the greatest thinkers of all ages. So you have the power to control the thoughts and the images that hold forth in your mind. Most of the problems that we face come from negative mental images that could have been erased at the outset. If you'd like to try an experiment, I'll give you some hard ones. Here's one that you'll have fun with. Never finish a negative statement. This is like an alcoholic saying, I'll never drink again. It's easy enough to say, I make a resolution, I'm not going to think negatively anymore. It lasts about 20 minutes. Maybe before the statement is through, you find yourself thinking, I'll never be able to make it. You've already thought negatively. So take a one-day period, like the AA people would say. Take a 24-hour period. This day I'm going to decide that I'm not going to finish or complete a negative statement. In other words, if you begin to say something negative, cut right in and correct it into a positive or creative tone. For instance, you may find yourself saying, boy, this is going to be a terrible day. Correct it by saying, this is going to be a terribly important day that I know I will grow through. That's what editing can do. You can change anything. But change the negative into a positive. Challenge yourself for one day and see if you can do it. We'll give you a gold star if you can do it for 1 hour. But it helps us to realize the work we have to do. But it's your mind. It's your mind. You have control of your mind. You are the master of your fate and circumstance. If you can begin to believe it and begin to work in that direction instead of simply reacting to things that are on the outside. Of course I feel miserable. Didn't you read about the hurricane? The only hurricane that can ever bother anyone is the one inside. If you straighten that one out, you'll find the way to cope with the outer experience. One of the most tauntingly remote things has always been referred to as reaching for the moon. Isn't that interesting? Symbol of the impossible. Oh, that's reaching for the moon. When I was a kid, that was the thing they often said. And in our day, we've witnessed the impossible made real. We've attributed the space program and to the marvels of engineering. But actually, the moon landing and the shuttle flights that are going on now are a matter of imagineering. Imagineering. A well-developed, intelligently guided imagination to create a plan for successful action. The ability to actually see the plan completed in mental imagery, and then to use that imagery as a motivation to carry it forward to actuality. Recently, I stood before one of the great construction projects here in this area. It's rather interesting because someone once said, when you come to New York, you're looking around and see all the buildings and the streets torn up, and say, boy, it's going to be a great city when they get through with it. But in front of this building project, there's a large sign that shows a picture of this colossal tower as it will ultimately look. It's a reminder that great skyscrapers are always impossibilities until the picture is formed as an image in the mind of the architect. We often use the expression, oh, it's just a figment of his imagination. Ever heard that? Maybe you've used it yourself. It's a figment of his imagination. Yeah, what would our civilization be like if it were not for the many figments that have led to progress and developments? Columbus' New World was a figment. Edison's incandescent lamp was a figment. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony was a figment. Michelangelo's Boy David was a figment. And the truth is that your life and mine could reach undreamed of heights of accomplishment if we were to cultivate the imagination in a creative and positive sense. That's what we're going to try and do. I want you to work with it this week, because it's a very important step. So that's why we have for us evolved a three-step process, and you can use this three-step process in meditation as a tremendous tool. What is the problem? Ask yourself, what is the problem? What is the need of your life? Write it down. You say, well, that's negative. I don't want to talk about my difficulties. There's nothing negative about a need. A need is very practical. It's realistic. We're told God shall supply every need of yours according to his riches. The problem is not in the need. It's in our image of lack. But the need is a vessel to be filled. So back to the principle, Bresheth Elohim, return to the allness of principle. In God consciousness there can be no lack, no emptiness, no limitation, no confusion, no inaction, no inharmony, no resistance. In God consciousness there's only oneness, fullness, wholeness. And you are one with that one. It's the beginning of your life. It's the foundation, the ground of your being. And let this evolve into a sense of let there be light. Let the light consciousness manifest. Where you see not lights off in the distance like the stars, but you see from a consciousness of light. You see with light. You are enlightened. And you see the rarefication of this light in terms of a faith perception that enables you to begin to see not things, but from an awareness of creativity, which enables you to see potentialities everywhere. And the dry land appears, the imagination process. Write your I am-age. Write the idea that comes to you as you begin to think in terms of yourself, imagining the creativity of your life coming out of your inmost self. It's a tremendous thing. If you can type, sit at the typer and let your fingers wander idly over the keyboards, or pick up pencil and paper, start to write. Let it unfold, coming out of you. You may amaze yourself. Poems will come forth, ideas, plans, recipes, all the things that we normally think about as getting from the outside. See them coming from within yourself. This will lead to the first sense of a plan, a goal, a direction. This is the first phase of our seven-step process. But remember, you're trying to open out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape from within, not to provide entry for a light supposed to be without, to use Browning's words. The answer is in you. In the ensuing days of the creation, we're going to consider next week the understanding and the will, which is symbolized by the sun and the moon, the flow of supporting ideas, which is what I call the swarming process. And then sixth step, the completion of the involutionary blueprint, which is the creation of man, symbolical. And the seventh, Sabbath rest, the incubation, the letting go process. And we'll round out this seven-step process. Let's take a few months now to be still. Let's experiment and experience this three-step process up to today. Lay aside your concerns, your anxieties, your feelings. Don't think in terms of doing something. Get the sense of not doing. Just letting go, not trying to do anything. You haven't got a care in the world. Get back to the principle, just to this primal realization of wholeness, oneness, the ground of your being. When we understand this, our whole prayer process takes on a different tone. We're not trying unconsciously to reach God somewhere. God is nowhere. God is now here. God is the root of your being. Not something to look to or talk to, but to realize as wholeness, as oneness, something to pray from. At the root of your being, you're a spiritual being with tremendous potentialities, seeking consciously to express through you. And let there be light. Get the sense of illumination, enlightenment, seeing everything from a consciousness of light. Light is everywhere. See your mind filled with light. Let there be a firmament. Out of this light comes a rarefication in terms of an awareness, creativity, the ability to see possibilities. Let the dry land appear. Let the image take shape. Not so much an image of a thing as your I-image, the realization of your imaging power of consciousness, the awareness that you have the ability to think and see and to express and experience these things in a manifestation. Let's give thanks that out of this three-stage process, we will experience wonderful potentialities in our life, new creativity in our work, new inspiration, and especially a new faith in the continuing revelation of divine mind into your consciousness, filling you with creative and wonderful attitudes, concepts, answers to life's needs. During all of this week, may you experience this free flow of the creative process through you. In every case, know that where you are, it's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And before they call, I will answer. In the heart of man, the cry, in the heart of God, supply. And my God shall provide every need of yours according to his riches. Through your consciousness comes answers, illustrations, faith, the awareness of substance, and the ability to cope, to deal with everything that happens in your life. Let's feel grateful for this. Grateful for not a lot of new ideas that we can put into our mind, but for an awareness of the infinite mind within us, through which we can release our imprisoned splendor. Praise God for the truth that makes us free. So be it.